Primarily, we work at the CEO and CFO level with your agencies. All your agencies are members of our organization. We have about 110 members across the state of New York, and we serve a twofold purpose. One part of the work we do is advocacy, so we advocate with government representatives on behalf of the agencies on regulatory and reimbursement issues, which hopefully makes things work a little better for you and for the children and families. And then the other part is our Center for Excellence. And that's when we bring people together for networking and forums such as this. So hopefully today you'll meet some other people that you haven't met before and can share some of your common stories. We're focusing on supervision today because we've heard across the board that that's where the most training is needed in those supervisory roles. Whether you're just about to begin to be a supervisor or whether you've been doing it for a couple of years, I think we probably all have the experience where we've had a really great supervisor. It makes a world of difference. And we may have had a so-so supervisor, and that can make a big difference too when you're going into work. So I hope everybody walks away with at least one thing today that will help them as they go back and work with the children and youth you serve, because I know it's hard work and it's really important work. So I am going to introduce our morning speaker. I have known him for about 30 years and he has made a big impact on my life and my work. I'm a little mad because he's retiring this year. And it's a big loss to the child welfare field because of his utmost knowledge over the years. But I'm very happy that I was able to coax him to come this morning and speak with you all for a short bit. So I want to introduce Bill Holicky, the Executive Director of the House of Good Shepherd in Utica, New York.
That's the only nice thing Diane's ever said about me.
Well, it's in a room full of strangers, so.
I know exactly how it feels. I know a room full of strangers too. Okay, so how come I'm here? Probably because a guy from Syracuse was too expensive. A guy from Onondaga County Community College blew Diane off. So I answered the phone. And,
Bad mistake.
And I always show up. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I've lived your life. I started as a college, not even a dropout, a college failout. Born and raised in Cleveland, ethnic family, a real cultural aversion to Germans because they destroyed our Eastern European country over the history, to minorities because that's the way ethnic neighborhoods were, and to the Yankees and the Giants because we always hated those people. And I still hate the Yankees and the Giants, so don't even start here. I went to a university in Cleveland and flunked out twice. It was the 60s. I had fun, didn't study, left town really kind of humiliated, and found a job as a child care worker at an agency in Connecticut. It was, I'll give you something to relate to. It was an agency for delinquent and pre-delinquent boys, ages 12 to 21, 100 boys, 2 dormitories of 40, 1 dormitory of 20. I was assigned to the dormitory of 40 boys ages 17 to 21. The day I started, there were 2 of us in that dormitory. And keep in mind, the job was $75 a week and room and board. The room was in the dormitory with the kids. There was a bed in the office. So that was my room. The board, we got free meals because we had to supervise the boys when they were in the dining room, so we got to eat too. So that's what I did. There were 2 of us assigned to that dormitory. And after 2 days on the job, the other guy went off duty for 2 days, and I had the dormitory alone. That's the training program that we had back then. I think we're doing a little better now. Not a lot, but you know, sometimes, but we're doing better. I worked at that agency for about 12 years. After I was there for about 9 months, I met the woman who became my wife. We got married. I went back to undergraduate school, and And although I had been in undergraduate school for 6 years, I still had 2 years to go. And I went back to school full-time and worked full-time until I got my undergraduate degree. And during that period of time, we had our first son. I got lucky and was able to go to graduate school at the University of Connecticut School of Social Work, and worked full-time and went to graduate school. And during that period, we had our second son. I worked as a child care worker, as an overnight worker, as a dormitory supervisor, as a social worker, a crisis worker, family therapist, a department head, and all at that agency before I came to the House of the Good Shepherd. So I've lived your life. I really have. I tell our new staff, our new hires, that I know what it's like. I know what it's like when you have an angry parent on the other end of the phone. I know what it's like at 5 in the morning when it's cold and it's dark and you're in the unit and your only job is to be ready to ensure that kids are safe in that unit. And you are fighting with every bit of your being to stay awake. And you can't make noise, and you can't turn on the TV, and you can't turn up the heat, and you can't do anything but read, and all reading does is put you back to sleep. I know what it's like. So, that's my training for this. That's where I come from. What I want to talk about just a little bit is that I had the same kind of introduction to supervision as you had, to being a supervisor, to being a boss. One day somebody left, and the next day somebody came up to me and said, "You're it, you're next, congratulations, great job." I mean, this went on all the way to the time that I got my job as an executive director. And I came to the House of the Good Shepherd from Connecticut, and I remember very vividly my first day. I spent the first 4.5 hours, 5 hours of my first day walking around the campus. And at that time, the House of the Good Shepherd was about 55 kids. It was about 45 staff. Just a small residential agency. And I spent those first 5 hours going around and literally meeting everybody. And after that, the fellow who was showing me around took me back to my office and said, "We'll get together, we have a meeting at about 3 o'clock and we'll catch up then." And I remember going into that office and closing the door and saying, "Oh my God, what the hell do I do now?" That's what it's like being a supervisor for the first time, isn't it? Oh my God, what the hell do I do now? It's all about people. You know, it's not about your knowledge of the job. It's not about the policies and the procedures. All of that is important. But what really gets the job done is the people. And suddenly, you've stopped being the most experienced child care person or the most experienced social worker, and you've suddenly become the least experienced administrator. You're no longer an advocate for your team. You're no longer the lead child care worker who needs to go over and tell those people what we need in this unit. Suddenly, you're the administrator. You're the face of the agency to all the people on your team. That's a very different role. I want to talk a little bit about leadership. Because for all of us now, suddenly we're in leadership roles. Suddenly we're out front. So I want to say a few things about leadership. I want to start out with something that I think is important. We all agree there's a few important things about being a leader. A few behaviors, few principles, and if we could just identify what those are, real leadership, we think, will emerge. This will just happen. But remember what Yogi Berra said. Yogi said, in theory and practice are the same, but in practice, they're not. So in practice, I don't believe that there are perfect leaders. I don't believe that there are people who are just born to lead, that they do all the right things all the time in the right situations, and that people just naturally fall behind them. I think we're all just people trying to do our job. I think we're trying to do the best we can every day. I believe that all of us just need to pay attention to a few things, and if we do that, we can begin to emerge as effective leaders. So I want to ask you for a little help. I'm going to give you my top 10 list of what it takes to be a leader. I'm going to ask for your help. Who's got number 10? Stand up. What's number 10?
Leaders exert influence but seldom use power.
There you go. Okay, number 10 principle of leadership. Leaders use influence, but they seldom use power. Jim Collins, great author, book Good to Great. If you haven't read it, you should. It's a terrific book. Says true leadership only exists if people follow when they have the freedom not to. When people follow when they have the freedom not to. Good leaders have a band of willing followers because they win the hearts and minds of their people. They can articulate a lofty, important, but achievable goal that everyone can buy into and take on together. They can share a vision for the future, which things are better, easier, more profitable, more exciting, more productive, just more fun. To be an effective leader, you have to win their hearts. Only after you win their hearts can you win their minds. So, to be a good leader, it's not about power. It's about influence. Influence. Who's got number 9? Number 9.
Leaders communicate.
Say that louder.
Leaders communicate.
Thank you. Leaders communicate. You have to be in touch. You have to be open and share information. When it comes to gaining influence, communication is how it's done. Constant and open communication is essential. Everybody has to know and understand what that lofty goal is, what we're all working toward. They have to understand why it's important. There needs to be an understanding that things are going to be better and that they have a confidence in you that you are the one who can get them there. Communication is verbal, and it's written, and it's graphic. It's meetings, it's newsletters, it's posters, it's memos. Communication often is just a unique language within your team, within your agency. House of Good Shepherd is a sanctuary agency. And we talk about the 7 commitments and my self-plans and all of those issues that are unique to us, but we're all on the same page. And using that language keeps us on the same page every day. So whatever your philosophy and whatever your cohering principles are, use that language and communicate in that language and build a team identity using that language. That's how we all get on the same page. Leaders are effective communicators. Number 8.
Leaders provide the resources that the team members need to be successful.
Absolutely. Everybody needs resources to be successful. There's an old down-home saying. What do you call a dog that has no legs? Don't matter because he ain't gonna come. You can't step up if you don't have legs. Legs for our people are the resources that they need every day. There's no point setting a big goal. There's no point communicating a vision if the team doesn't have the knowledge, they don't have the resources, they don't have the training to get there. It's like that first-time supervisor, like somebody saying, congratulations, you're it. That doesn't help you. It doesn't help you at all. You end up in your office saying, oh my God, what do I do now? You have to have the resources, and your team has to have the resources, or you're doomed to failure. By resources, I don't just mean money. Resources are everything. Resources are, of course, money, but it's also training. It's also good people. It's also the kind of benefit package that your team needs to stay intact. It's an understanding of what the work is. It's the building that you work in. All of those things are important. The only tool, if the only tool you give your people is a hammer, everything is going to look like a nail. Your staff need an entire toolbox of resources in order to be successful. And leaders are responsible for getting the resources that the team needs. Number 7.
Leaders communicate, communicate, communicate.
We've been there, but we're going back there again. We need to look at communication again. Communication, remember, is a dialogue. It's not a monologue. It's not me standing up here telling you and then you going out and do stuff. It's communication, it's dialogue. Feedback flows both ways. Your people have important input to give to you. Good leaders ask for input, they create the opportunity for dialogue, and then they listen, and they listen hard. It has to happen in an atmosphere of safety and trust. Your people have to feel as though they can really tell you, and that they're not going to be punished for it, they're not going to be reprimanded for it, that they can be honest and open, and you can engage in that and help them fix that problem. If somebody fears for his job or his status on the team, then the feedback won't be very honest or valuable. Great leaders have to be great listeners. Number 6.
Leaders never leave sensitive documents in the copier.
Okay, you got that? Leaders never leave sensitive documents in the copier or in the printer or in a reply all email or in a folder in the break room. Never. I've done it. It's not helpful. You always have to clean up after yourself, or you're really going to have to clean up after yourself. Okay? Number 5.
Leaders praise in public and chastise in private.
In his book, It's Your Ship, another great book, Michael Abrashoff says that the leader should be the tide that raises all boats. And that one way to do this is through recognition and praise. Public recognition and praise is particularly effective in that it builds pride, self-esteem, and a sense of team. And it shares the glory across the team. Bringing public attention to someone falling short in performance and goal attainment has exactly the opposite effect. It undermines the leader's relationship with the individual, causes public humiliation, anger, and resentment, and create a sympathetic backlash among members of the team. We've all had that experience. It doesn't matter whether we were 11 years old and our mom said something to us at the grocery store, or that insensitive pain-in-the-ass professor in college pointed out that we weren't prepared for that class, or somewhere in a training when we weren't paying attention, somebody called us for it. It's humiliating. It doesn't help. In a private setting, pointing out goals and performance shortcomings provides the leader with an opportunity to explore why it happened, how to help the individual staff member do better, how the problem might be addressed differently, and give the employee reassurance that you still have confidence in that employee, that you as the leader still have confidence, and that you're there to empower that employee to do better. Praise in public, chastise in private. Number 4,
Leaders are accountable.
leaders are accountable. Leader doesn't get a free pass on accountability simply because she's in charge. In fact, leader typically is the most accountable person on the team. Leader has to take the hit for the team. It's the leader who communicates the vision, remember. It's the leader who sets the goal, who provides the resources, and who builds the team. And the leader has to take the fall, too, when the team falls short. They don't fire the third baseman, they fire the manager. That's because the leader is responsible. Leaders don't throw members of their team under the bus when things go wrong, even when that team member may be the responsible team member. You can delegate the work, but not the responsibility for reaching the goal. Leaders are accountable. Number 3,
Leaders celebrate wins.
leaders celebrate wins. You gotta celebrate. You have to recognize when things go well. I spent a long time in my career saying that when things are right, hell, that's the way they're supposed to be. When things go wrong is when my blood starts to get agitated. That's not good enough. We talked about the vision for the future, setting that big lofty goal, and we all know that if it's big enough and that goal is bold enough, it's likely that we're going to wait a long, long time before the victory celebration. In the meantime, we're all going to be slaving away in our cubicles, in our units, in our offices, and we'll feel as though we're not making progress, and our contribution is inconsequential, and probably, in the long run, unattainable. When we first started Sanctuary at the House of the Good Shepherd, keep in mind it takes 4 or 5 years before you're certified as an agency. And the first thing that happens when you move towards Sanctuary is that you lose most of the tools you used to have, and you have to build a new toolbox. For a long time, that leaves people just floating out there, feeling powerless. You have to celebrate all the small wins along the way. So we started to take some time to celebrate those small wins. When you're building a house, when you build the foundation, you take a break and have a beer. When you're building your own program, when you're building your own team, every time you make some progress, take a break and have some beer. Celebrate a little bit. Gains that have been accomplished. Restate that lofty goal and recognize that you're closer to achieving it and move forward then with the next step. Leaders always celebrate wins with their team. Number 2.
Leaders remember that someone is always watching.
Someone is always watching. Always. Patrick Lencioni, who's a leadership guru, said, "You're probably not doing a good job as a leader unless your employees can do a good impression of you when you're not around." Leaders role model all the time. The behavior they show sets the bar for everyone else. And when I say the behavior they show sets the bar, that's everything. It's when you arrive for work and when you leave. It's how you dress. It's how you interact with clients or with family members. How you interact with your team. How approachable you are. How friendly you can be. Any of those things you role model all the time. Leaders have to show courage, restraint, pride, grace, respect, commitment, understanding, support, and especially empathy. Especially empathy. John Quincy Adams said, "If your actions inspire others to dream more, to learn more, to do more, and to become more, that's when you're a leader." Leaders remember that someone is always watching, and leaders don't get a pass on accountability. Now the number one principle of leadership. Leaders are only as good as the team. Only as good as the team. Again, in Good to Great, Jim Collins talks about having the right people on the bus. You've heard that phrase. You need to have the right people on the bus. But Collins goes even further than that. It's not just enough to have good people on the bus. Everybody's good people. You know, you end up visiting with supervisors or leaders, and you know that it's like any group. If you have a unit of kids, there's always one worst kid, isn't there? There's always one worst kid. And something can happen and that worst kid leaves, and guess what? You still have a worst kid. It's just a different face. There's always a worst performer on your team. And if that team member leaves, guess what? Yeah, there's always a worst member of the team. So Collins says it's not enough to have good people who mean well. They have to be the right people. They have to have the right attitude. They have to be oriented toward the work. It's a lot easier to hire somebody than it is to terminate somebody. It's a lot easier to hire somebody than to be patient and suck it up and take the overtime until you find the right person. But Collins says, as I said, it's not enough to have good people, but you have to have the right people. And beyond that, not only do you have to have the right people on the bus, but you have to have the right people in the right seats. You have to have the right people doing the right jobs in order for your team to function as high as it can. Leader chooses the team to have the training, the experience, the disposition, the skill sets, and the motivations to succeed. So there you have it. That's my top 10 list of what it takes to be a good leader. You know, I believe that if you put these principles ahead of your interests and your ego, you'll emerge as a good, eventually perhaps a great leader. I want to leave you with one last final thought, a fundamental and universal truth. It comes from Casey Stengel. I remember Casey Stengel, the great manager of the Yankees. Casey said this about leadership. Always remember this. The secret to great leadership is keeping the people who hate you away from the people who are undecided. Thanks very much. Good luck.